All right, so we're going to get started, and I'm very pleased and happy to be able to introduce to you Dr. Roger Day, who is faculty in biomedical informatics. Rumor has it he's retired, although actually I think what he is doing has increased substantially since he retired. So I'm not sure I believe it's retired. So,
but getting more done anyway.
But he's going to talk about a problem that I think is really critical to think about when you're dealing with any kind of data, but perhaps even more so with the type of data types that we've been talking about, which is reproducibility. So, Roger?
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Nice to be here. I have a bunch of favorite points and peeves and things like that to get out, and I think they're important for people to know about. So I'll be a little bit passionate, so watch out. You also noticed I'm not using PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint. How many people love PowerPoint? Okay, very good, very good. You are entitled to hate me if you love PowerPoint. It works well because the printouts work well and a bunch of other reasons I won't go into. The first page of your handout is an outline of what I would talk about if I had enough time. I don't, so I'm going to probably only cover the first section and the second section. Might dip slightly into the third section if there is a time. But meanwhile, you can follow the bouncing ball if you want, or whatever. So the first section has to do with reproducibility of data analysis, being able to reproduce the data analysis that somebody else done, or even that you yourself did. The second section, it's down there, is going to be about achieving internal and external validity. That's much more centered specifically on some of the challenges of personalized medicine. And although it sounds like a dry title, I think it's not a dry topic at all. And you'll see why. What I'm not going to talk too much about is the replication and reproducibility crisis at large in the scientific community. It's big, it's very big, it's critical. A lot of people are worried about it, but just to let you know that it's there, a couple of things that you might be interested in that sometimes explain these things are, where a wonderful study comes out, and then the study that comes along to replicate that result, the effect is smaller, and then the next one it's smaller still, and the next one smaller still. So there is information here about things like publication bias as a possible role, and regression to the mean as a possible role. If you're interested, by all means read it, and if you ever have any questions, you can try to get a hold of me. I'm happy to talk about these things. Okay? So here's our preamble to the talk, and that's two words, replication and reproducibility. The way I understand this is replication has to do with someone doing a second study to determine how valid the first study might be, to see whether or not, like we do in science, discoveries can actually be replicated so that our confidence can increase. Reproducibility is something else altogether, in my mind, and that is, you've got the data set, you analyze the data, can you reproduce that data analysis tomorrow? Or can somebody on the other side of the world reproduce your analysis next week? Sometimes people use reproducibility for what I'm calling replication. I won't worry about that too much. Okay? But we're going to start with a provocative example, a historic example, a very important one involving personalized cancer medicine and the experience of a major research effort at Duke University to help cancer patients. I have some references here. If you late at night, nothing to do, and you're tired of YouTube, here's something on YouTube that you might want to see. Keith Baggerly, who gives a great talk in detail about this, it will make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It's really quite disturbing. He invented, with Kevin Coombs, this concept of forensic bioinformatics. When you can't reproduce the data analysis, maybe you can sort of work backwards, Sherlock Holmes style, and figure out what the heck did they do. They did a lot of that, and the results were astounding. This computer wants me to type an equation here. I will refrain from doing so. All right, so the setting was predicting which cancer patients should or should not get which chemotherapy drugs, obviously so important because so many patients don't even respond. Their hair falls out, they get sick, all kinds of terrible things, and it doesn't do them any good. It's a horror show. Very important problem. What's the technique? Using drug sensitivity data for a panel of cell lines, here we go, cell lines, the NCI 60 from the National Cancer Institute, 60 cell lines that have been around for 4 decades now, maybe? A long, long time. And every new cancer drug that comes along is tested against these, and the results of how well the cancer drug shrinks each of these cell lines is recorded, and anybody can get that data. Okay? Well, what do we do now? Well, now we're in the era of big data, microarray analyses for gene expression. So let's get ourselves array profiles for each of these cell lines. Now you have the gene expression, you have the sensitivity to your favorite drug of the day. Maybe you can use the expression array to figure out which of those cell lines, or to predict which of those cell lines will respond. If you get a good model, what do? You apply it to patients' tumors, and all of a sudden you have a way of personalizing cancer medicine for your patients. Then, if their hair falls out, at least it's for a good cause because they're going to get better. Well, that sounds really good. Really, really good. Everybody was excited about this. I think $10 million or more of grant money went into this. Publications to the tune of maybe 24 publications in the highest impact factor journals there are. Things that I would salivate to get published in. And down at MD Anderson in Texas, they say, we have to do this here for our patients. Let's start our own clinical trials. Okay, biostatistician, let's get started. Biostatistician says, oh yeah, this is exciting. First, let me make sure that I don't mess it up. Let me see if I can reproduce the data analysis. So here we go. And this is, let's see if I can move this around here. Can I? No. Oh, that's too bad. Okay. Well, that's what happens. So there's this Nature Medicine paper right here on the far left. You can see a heat map describing the association of 45 significant genes by t-test with the classifications of the cell lines as to responders and non-responders. It looks brilliant. Could they reproduce it? You bet they could. They selected the 45 best by t-test, and they constructed the heat map, and by golly, look at that one in the middle. It's perfect, right? And then, of course, statisticians are always fearful of making a mistake. Let's just check the actual genes themselves. So they took, instead of their own t-tests, they took the 45 genes that were reported out of Duke, and they plotted that heat map, and that's what you have on the right there under reported genes. And you can see nothing. Nothing. I don't know. Bothers me. I bother you. Now, what's going on here? Well, you can compare the gene lists, and on the right you see a compare. There's even some R code here, so you can reproduce the data analysis by running this R code. Right? And what do you get? Well, let's see. I'm going to quote Keith Baggerly himself in his talk. I'm going to say, does anybody see a pattern here? I'll bet you do. I bet you do. And what we're seeing is that these genes are offset by 1. What do you think happened? Maybe somebody pasted data into their Excel spreadsheet and they were just a little careless and they're off by 1. No big deal. Mistakes happen, right? But if you're trying to predict whether a patient's going to respond to a chemotherapy drug, well, that is a big deal. So that's a problem. So that was what went wrong, example 1. How about example 2, miscoding? Okay, so zeros are responders, ones are non-responders. Oops, oh no, I got that messed up. It's actually backwards. So they actually did publish, believe it or not, a prediction rule to predict who was going to respond, which predicted who was not going to respond instead. Okay? Now, okay, mistakes happen. I think that's a pretty serious mistake. Now here's one that you've probably heard about these. I'll bet many of you have heard. Who's heard of these two examples so far that I've given? Almost nobody. Wow. I'm glad I'm here. This is important to know. This is big time trouble. Here's another one that's not as well known, and apparently it's not known anyway. But machine learning methods. Machine learning methods must be the most fantastic thing we've got going for us. Let's apply that. We won't do any stinking t-tests. Let's use machine learning. So what would you use? Well, here's a good one. It's called K-means cluster method. Okay, K-means cluster method. Well, the NCI wanted to replicate the results that they were producing for one of their predictive rules. I think it was for lung cancer, I think. And went to replicate the thing. Couldn't do it. They couldn't produce they couldn't classify the patients the way that the algorithm could. Couldn't figure out why. They said, well, let's go back and try it again. They tried it again 5 minutes later, and they could reproduce it again, but they couldn't even reproduce their own results. Oh, what would happen is the second time around, some of these classifications would swap from responder to non-responder and vice versa. What's going on? Well, this technique starts by picking randomly chosen starting points for these centroids, and then it lets the data tug them around, right, until such a time as you've separated groups, right, and in the space of the features, all right. So, well, of course, it's foolproof. If you were to pick other starting points, of course they'd end up in the same place, wouldn't they now? Well, they don't. Okay, so it's probably a good idea if you're ever using a technique that requires starting points that are arbitrary, you might want to try more than one starting point. And just to show that I'm not snobbish, about 25 years ago, I published a paper with a buddy. We sent it in. It was an EM algorithm and so forth. EM algorithms require a starting point. And we said, nice paper. I thought it was pretty good. All right. And the reviewer says, did the gentleman happen to try other starting points to see if there are other local maxima? And we sort of, yes.
This big paper they published cannot reproduce the paper still on the journal, or they retracted?
There's been a slew of retractions. Retractions, yes. Yes. You can go to retractionwatch.org and you can pick up all these things are tracked.
So your two sample all retracted already?
Retracted.
Oh, this is long gone now.
Years ago.
It's, years ago. This was about 8, 9 years ago, I think. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so don't worry that it's not out there now anymore. All right. But if that's going to give you comfort, I plan to take your comfort away pretty soon. All right. All right. So anyway, there is audio of Lisa McShane's testimony about this that's really interesting to listen to. That goes into it in great detail, what their experience was with it. Here's another thing that fails. Sometimes integrity fails. All right? Did you know that? For example, one of these analyses was sent out to an independent party in Europe to demonstrate that it is valid, right? To reproduce and come back and say, and sure enough, the message came out that the data analysis is fine and was all reproduced. But it turned out that what had actually been done was not what was being claimed to have been done. In fact, the actual labels were sent out as well. So it was a bogus claim. How about this? You know, heat maps are nice, but you know, you see one heat map, you've seen them all, right? Well, Keith Bagley was looking at one of these papers and saw that heat map. It had 25 genes and some other article in a high impact journal and said, you know, that heat map, 25 genes, that's kind of familiar somehow. And dug out in his journals, found another paper, a different kind of cancer, a different drug, same heat map. All right? Okay? That's not good. Okay? And how? The miracle is how in the world did he find it? You know, but he did. And finally, one fabulous example, again, another high-impact journal paper in which genes that were reported as significant weren't even on the array. But that's okay because it fit with the narrative that had to do with DNA repair, so it was okay. All right. Well, it's not okay, of course, but it indicates that people can do a lot of things that are simply incompetent and lacking in caring. At some point, they slip over to actually doing things that are not above board. All right. Why would they do such a thing? Well, we're going to come back to why they do things like that in a little bit later. But meanwhile, there's another category of failures called failure of leadership. So the senior research leadership in many large projects, they don't check their results. Even sometimes, doctoral student supervisors don't have time to check everything. But when it's a life and death matter, you might want to check your details of the people working for you a little bit every once in a while. And I think that rarely happens. That's one problem. Another problem is this: prestigious journals might not publish a letter that criticizes a previous article, especially, I think, if it is suggesting that something really wrong happened. And that's what happened here. Baggerly and Coombs tried to publish articles saying, we ran this data and this is what we found. And so it calls into question these results. Could not get that letter in the journal. You know where they published their results? Finally, they published a voluminous analysis of forensic bioinformatics. Where do you think they published it? Do you think it was in Nature Medicine or perhaps
National Park.
National Park?
Inquirer.
National Enquirer? You're only one step higher in prestige.
Yeah.
All right. It was the Annals of Applied Statistics. All right. Anybody happen to know the impact factor for Annals of Applied Statistics? Anybody happen to? I think you have to set your significant digits very low to find that out. All right. However, eventually, basically the entire community of biostatisticians working in cancer got together and wrote letters with many signatures on it. What happened? Not much. All right. Studies were stopped at MD Anderson and at Duke. And then Duke decided to convene a high-level panel. I think there were directors of cancer institutes that were brought in to review the situation. They brought them in Flumen, and they made the presentation. And, the people said, oh, yeah, that looks pretty good. Yeah, that data looks pretty good. We think it's fine. And a report was written, and the report was never made public. And as far as I know, nobody ever found out who the members of the group writing the report were. Okay? So, there will be alcohol later, right? Because this is getting bad. All right. All right. So, administrative self-interest. Okay, you have to worry about being sued. You don't want your university sued. Your lawyers cost a lot of money. One thing that happened that was really horrible was this one. It turned out, it took years for this to come out. There was a oncology fellow who was really disturbed by the fact, by some of the things going on, and said, we really need to document the analyses, and we should provide that information to the journal as supplemental information. And the leader said, no, we really don't want to do that. He got disturbed, so he wrote to the higher levels of administration in Duke, and they blew him off, which meant that he was kind of stuck in limbo in his fellowship and really set his career back by virtue of the fact that the whistleblower was kind of crushed by this process. I mentioned the non-transparent report. And finally, the truth will out, right? What is the truth? Turns out that Dr. Potty had put on his original application that he had a Rhodes Scholarship when he hadn't. Now, you see, if you were at the top level administration in the university and your people falsify data, put patients at risk, set back science for God knows how long, that's okay. But if you lie on your application, that's not good. Okay, so that's what opened it up. And so Baggerly says, we've been yelling about the science for 3 years. So I find it ironic that revelations about Poly's fake Rhodes Scholarship got things rolling, finally. That was, until then, the clinical trial had been restarted. The one that was treating patients based on these bogus algorithms were restarted. Now there's been lawsuits. Patients have been suing Duke for this. There was some recent outcome of one of them. Anyway, so, but you know, we have, yes, sir.
Have another reason saying for the PI.
Yeah.
Now the data analysis now is it's not as previously easy analysis. For example, the macroarray and DNA RNA sequencing data, it
Right.
really needs some special knowledge to analysis.
Absolutely.
Not the PI knows well of the analysis.
That's an issue. The
Yeah,
specialization.
that's a big problem.
Specialization is an issue. I'll get to
So
solutions.
It's difficult for the PI.
I'll get to solutions later in just a couple of minutes. Okay. Okay. But meanwhile, we have the bulwark against scientific fraud, the Office of Research Integrity. Office of Research Integrity. Right there. Okay. They concluded, they gave the main perpetrator a 5-year ban on federal research funding. As Baggerly says, a 5-year ban for one individual researcher is a sufficient response to a case involving millions of taxpayer dollars, completely fabricated data, and hundreds to thousands of patients in invasive clinical trials.
Should be good.
Hmm? But that was the final, that's it, that's the end, that's the final resolution of this case. So, so that's what happens. Now, to me, what happens? Life penalties encourage future abuses. Okay? And finally, a scientific culture that encourages little frauds. I couldn't resist. Okay, so if the system encourages little frauds, and the young people learn that little frauds are okay because everybody does it, how about the next slightly larger fraud? Is that okay? Well, this happens all the time. I'm told that it's well over 90% of the time that you ask for a letter of support for your grant, and the person who wants it says, what? Sure, I'll give you a letter. Just draft it up for me, no problem. As soon as you give me a draft, I'll write you a letter. I'll basically tinker with a few words here and there to personalize it, right? And in goes your grant, in goes your letter. Well, for a young person that encounters this for the first time, this is a really disturbing thing to have to do. Because you have to write in the words of your boss. You don't know your boss. You don't know if he says ain't or not, or yuns for that matter, you know? So you don't know that. You don't know if you should be really bragging or should you be really modest, you know? You have no idea how to do this. And isn't it a little smelly? What happens then is people go in two directions. Some people say, well, I can just barely accept this, but I guess I'll go along. Some people say, oh, great, this is a system I could really do very well in. And those people get very comfortable with, for example, courtesy authorships for the highly placed. We know that goes on. Covering up data problems. You know, you got your article about ready to go in, and then you uncover there was a data problem, right? What do? Well, you can do two things. You can say, I'm not sending that until I know what's really going on with this data. And you can work at that, and you can waste the next week and a half figuring it out. And maybe when you're all done, it turned out it was all right anyway. Or you can say, well, that might happen, so I'm just going to send it in. Okay? So it's pretty easy for people to do that. That's not hard for people to do and feel really bad about. Why? Because it's a competitive environment. Right? And we have to get our papers published or else, right? And finally, ultimately, you end up falsifying data. All right, now that's a bigger leap, but after you've, sunk down a few levels, one more level might not seem so bad. Okay. Anyway, it's an amusing read, so I suggest everybody read it. It's from about 3 months ago. Okay, so the benefits of reproducible analysis. We haven't talked about how to do it yet, but this is the benefits. Number one, it makes technology transfer easier. Predictive models can be accurately applied to future data. If I'm an MD Anderson and they have an algorithm and it's properly documented and I can reproduce it and I can prove to myself I did it right because I can reproduce their data, then I can transfer that technology accurately someplace else. Makes the data updates easier. Okay, what happens? So as a biostatistician, how often did it happen to me that I analyzed the data and 2 months pass and the investigator tells me, oh, I have some more data for you. Well, it'd be really nice if you had to just update the data and turn the crank and poof, your report is automatically generated. It encourages planning and documentation. We're going to talk about the literate programming paradigm in a minute. It guards against incompetence and fraud. Others can reproduce an analysis easily, so incompetence and fraud become easier to detect. And easy detection of mistakes and cheats will encourage care and discourage fraud. So that's pretty good return on investment, I think. Huh? So the stakes are high. This is a hot field. Personalized medicine is a hot field. There's professional advancement, there's grants, there's competition. You want to be the first because the first gets more credit and more grants after that, and so forth and so on. I hate hot fields, by the way. I think hot fields are the wrong place to be. Anyway, and Ionitis, way back on page 10, I want to hear if anybody's wrestling to go to page 10. Good, nobody is. He lists, I think, 8 different causes for papers. This is a famous paper called Why Most Published Research Results Are Wrong. Most, greater than 50%. And he tries to make that case. He lists 8 different factors, things like small sample sizes and blah, 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 blah. And what's the last one? Hot field. If it's a hot field, then you're going to encounter unreplicable results more frequently. How about that? Why? Anybody have any guesses why? Anybody want to take a stab?
Because it's so competitive.
Because it's so competitive. You can't afford to wait. You can't afford to check your work. You don't have time for that. So hot fields are a bad place to find good science. Wow, I bet this is the first time you've ever heard that, I'm guessing. But if done well, cancer patients will receive more effective personalized medicine. That would be fantastic, especially for those of us, most of us probably have lost a lot of dear loved people from cancer. If it's done poorly, you have the opportunity cost of better ideas not tested because the system is gummed up by clinical trials testing bogus ideas. That sets things back a lot. And of course, finally, mistreating cancer patients, that's no joke. So those are some of the issues there. Well, let's see, solutions. Well, I can't believe I just got to 1C. Solutions, the role of individuals. Well, you need tools to do reproducible analysis well. There are tools. First of all, there's the classic document, the fact that you are archiving the data. You freeze the data, you're going to analyze the data. The investigator comes by 3 days later and says, I got more data. You say, sorry, bub, it's frozen, data's frozen. Scripts instead of interactive interfaces. If you click your way to your answers, that's not reproducible. And nobody else can reproduce it either. And you can't do it next week because you don't have a record of it. All right, so you're much better off either being or having on staff somebody that knows how to analyze data the old-fashioned way by writing code. And that code is documented and it doesn't go away, hopefully, if you back up your file. All right, so scripts instead of interactive interfaces. And there are a lot of tools called literate programming, where you combine your report writing and the code. You put the code right into the report. And when you press the button, it generates the report and it analyzes all the data. All right? And you can reproduce it, and somebody on the other side of the world can take the same data, the same code, press the button, and redo it. Of course, unless it involves random number generators, in which case you have to say what the seed is also. And I hope you did it at least twice. All right. So these are, if you're an R programmer, which I am, then you've used these for documentation. SWeave, you have to be probably a little bit smarter than I am. I used to be that smart. It's too hard for me. So I use R Markdown, which is much newer, pretty easy to use. I teach it to all my students so that they can get used to, first of all, writing reports, documenting what they do, and making it reproducible. This is really a great gift. When you have that skill, you're really an advanced. How about journals? I won't go into this in detail, but there's a lot of effort to really mandate data sharing to a large degree so that people can reproduce analyses, even if they don't have your code, at least they have your data. So that can help. Public Library of Science has its criteria, and as you see here in this article, Journals Unite for Reproducibility, you have principles and guidelines in reporting preclinical research, NIH, Science, Nature, other science editors, funders, and so forth. There's a lot of focus on this. A lot of people worry about it. And the role of institutions and their leaders. The solution to that problem is very simple. To misquote President Clinton, it's the integrity, stupid. It's not the lawyers, it's not the lawsuits, it's not the papers, newspapers, it's the integrity. Now, that's easier said than done. If everybody has any idea how to get that happening, I'd love to hear the answer to that. Okay? And I think that concludes part one of this talk. Are there any questions or discussion points at this point? We can make a quick one. Yeah.
It was very good. I was just going to make the point that the journals, when I review the journals, is very frustrating to see how the other people behave. They have very bad reviews to begin with, one or two or three sentences on each paper.
Yes.
And the editors play a lot of political games with the people sending papers. So you end up with a bad paper that you don't like it, and you 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 giving a bad reputation on it, and the editor liked the guy anyway and trying to make something like it. So the journalists itself are running out of people who actually want to take this job seriously.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem because the publication comes out the way that it is, but it's garbage.
I have to say, as a paper, I just got accepted finally after 2.5 years. And that paper, the higher the quality of the journal, the poorer the editorial response was. And when I did get a review, the review was short and of poor quality. Now, and I'll put in a plug for the journal Cancer Informatics, which I've published in a few times. And every single time I've gotten multiple reviews of high quality. Every single time. The last one, 5 reviews. Can you believe 5 reviews? And every one of them made a real substantive improvement in the paper. So it can be done. I don't know how they get people to do it, but they get me to do it. So, anything else? Yeah.
For the solution, I still have the question. Say for PI,
Yeah.
you spend the money for the RNA sake. You spend big money on it, right? You pay
Yes.
at the high cost. You get the data. You need analysis. Analysis is still another big money for
Yes.
the data analysis itself.
Oh, statisticians don't make much money at all.
But anyway, we pay the big money for the analysis, and ourselves really don't know very well for the analysis. So we even hire the company to for the analysis. So we even pay the money. We really like to get the high quality data, but we cannot control.
Well, you can insist on a reproducible analysis. Just insist on it.
Just after they do again, or how?
No, they provide you with all of the documentation you need. Ideally, it will be in the form of a literate program, a report with the code embedded that you or anybody else can examine and can rerun.
But
and get the
even
same
they
results.
gave me, I I don't know, I don't have the knowledge for the code auto analysis. So they give me a result, tell me which gene or what they report me.
They don't give you that. They give you the report that has the code in it, both before and after they click the button to process the thing.
So then you don't pay someone else to do your analysis again, you do their information.
They don't-
That will be good. You hire different, company to
just
analysis.
second.
That's really too much. We
They don't have
enough
to
money.
they don't have to redo the analysis. All
No,
they
I'm
have to
saying just
do
to
is
read.
press one button and see to it that those results actually do come out. And then you can send it to your colleague on the other coast who has a biostatistician friend that is willing to do it for a pitcher of beer, which most of them are, and we'll reprocess it and to see whether or not it comes out the same. And it won't cost them hardly any time at all. Because it's reproducible. Because it's put into a format like R Markdown, right? That will allow anybody, anywhere in the world to redo it. Just bring in the file, press the button, boom, you have the output, the report, and you're all set.
Can I just add something here? I think maybe the key difference is what Roger's talking about makes the analyses inspectable. You actually can look at how the analysis was done specifically. It's a big distinction.
That's right. And all the details are there. Every single thing is exposed. It's all transparent. All right? So you could never have had the crisis that came out of the Duke University group if they had been using that process. MD Anderson, you cannot analyze any bioinformatics data set without using, they like SWeave, because they're smarter than me. But it's tech. But anyway, they won't let anything come out of there unless that code is embedded in a report that can be reprocessed by anybody at any time, anywhere. And it can be done. It's not that hard. You can learn how to do it. We teach our students how to do it. Okay? Let me move on, because this is also a chunk of very important stuff, and time's getting on. This 2A that you see is a theme that I drive home for my students pretty intensively. The relationship between bias, variance, sample size, and personalized medicine. Okay? This is an idea of widespread application and critical importance throughout personalized medicine and well beyond, actually. And some decisions, there's some decision you make that triggers how you're going to analyze the data, that deals how much overfitted or underfitted will it be? What's the complexity? What's the number of parameters? Do we chop the data set into tiny pieces of people that are very similar to me, tuba playing biostatisticians? There must be 3 or 4 of us, all right? Unfortunately, they don't have my diseases, all right? So you can chop things up like that. It's a kind of a trade-off between reliability, which is low variance. That is, if I did the same study again on a parallel planet, would I get similar results? Low variance. But what if I have an accurate answer to the wrong question? Well, validity is the question of whether you're asking the right question or not. All right? Well, that's a low bias thing. If the bias is low, it means you're asking pretty much the right question. And sometimes you cannot get both of them at the same time. This is what I'm going to talk about. Okay. Okay, equations. You can all close your eyes now. Mean squared error in regression is a classic example. The mean squared error measures how close your estimate to some parameter is by looking at the difference and squaring it and taking the average over if you were to do the study many times. That has 2 components, the variance and the square of the bias. Okay? In this diagram that you see here, there's a horizontal axis that represents the degree of lumpiness or splittiness of your method, or complexity, okay? And all of these things that you see down the bottom here, they all have the same basic principle. That's why I'm driving this to you here, okay? And that is that if you get models that are really simple, like on the left, what you tend to get is what? You might get like low variance, but high bias, because you're asking really the wrong question, right? If I lump together tuba-playing biostatisticians with the rest of the world, I don't want to know about the rest of the world. I want to know about people just like me, right? So in that sense, it's the wrong question. If I ask a question about the whole world, the sample size is fantastic, so the variance is very low. So there's your trade-off. At the other extreme is maybe I have a very complex model, maybe with many parameters. I'm sorry over there, guys. This screen's closer. I have many parameters. Maybe I have like many components of a principal components analysis. Maybe I have a penalty for model complexity, which is small instead of large, a smoothing penalty. Or maybe I am using prior information, but I have only like a light prior. So the data is telling the whole story. Then you're going to overfit the data. The variance will be high because if you did it in a different universe, you get completely different answers. Right? But the bias would be low because on average you're asking you're going to get the right answer to the wrong question. Okay. Here's a favorite example of mine. Treatments given to 100 patients. Of them, only 8 of them respond. But by golly, look at this. There's a subgroup of 5 patients. Personalized medicine says that 3 of them respond. That's a 60% response rate. That's fantastic. Okay. Should the treatment be recommended for people in the subgroup D? Yes or no? Well, I don't know, because there's a lot of stuff that I need to know before I can make a good judgment. What if D and L are 2 alleles of a gene that is known to affect this drug's pharmacodynamics? Then there's a strong reason to believe that we should have gotten different results. And then what would we do? Would we use the group D data primarily, or would we look at the total? We'd probably be pretty content focusing on just the group D, because we know the group that's an important variable. What if it's 1 gene out of 100? They're all known to affect pharmacodynamics of this same drug. Well, now I'm a little bit more confused as to how much I should focus on the first column. Maybe there's something to be said for it, but I'm not quite sure. What if they're known to affect not this drug's pharmacodynamics, but another drug's pharmacodynamics? A very similar drug, or maybe not so similar. You know, all these things would affect your judgment, wouldn't it, as to how to balance between lumping and splitting. Lumping means looking at lumping means looking at the total column, and splitting means looking only at the group D column. Okay? You know, science involves both lumping and splitting, and they're both important. They work hand in hand, right? And that's what we're trying to do when we personalize medicine. Okay, how about this? What if there are 2 alleles of a gene which is 1 out of 100,000? We don't know anything about them. We have no reason to suspect any of them. This is just plucked out of the air. How much then would you want to lump versus split? All right, I'll bet you have some answers. How many people would prefer to lump? Oh, there's a lumper over there. There's a lumper over there. Okay, very good. Because what?
Because it decreased bias, to instead of being very selective just on those 5 patients.
There's no reason to believe those 5 patients would be different.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Whereas at the top, there was plenty of reason.
Yeah.
All right. Now I tell you, D is dark hair and L is light hair. And you say, that's nuts. You know, what's hair color got to do anything with it? Okay. But then your colleague says, you know, I was just reading an article in the National Enquirer, and it noted that people with dark hair tend to come from, for example, the Southern Hemisphere, and they have different distributions of alleles of that same gene that we got on the top. Right? Now, is it important or not important? So you see, it's very, very difficult to figure out how to personalize medicine. It's no easy matter. All right, but in every case, you are trying to balance between over-personalizing and over-generalizing, and you need to try to find a compromise which is the right. So yes, sir.
I'm sorry to be a little dense at understanding this, but going back to your, if those 3 out of the 5
Yeah.
happen to be tuba-playing statisticians,
Mhm.
would this be of interest to those? I mean, if you were, I mean, it'd be a very strong bias, but it would still be useful information for that particular cohort?
It'd be very useful for setting up a jam session, for starters, right?
So there is some value.
So there's certainly value from that point of view. Or perhaps it's a.
Well, you might want
It's a
another
moral
instrument.
hazard, actually.
Maybe clarinet.
But, yeah, if there were yet another, yes, I think what you're saying, if D correlates with some other parameter, well, we already had that because it correlated with hair color, right? So that's an issue too. You know, a parameter is not just a feature is not just a feature, but it's also everything it's strongly correlated with. Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting question. Okay, so consequences of splitting. Splitting, I'm using the word splitting to kind of represent what we'd like to do when one approach to personalizing medicine is to focus on people who are similar, right? Like that first column. All right, what happens when you split, when you look at smaller and smaller subgroups? Well, you decrease bias because you're asking the right question about the kinds of patients you're interested in, and they are not different from all those other people who don't play the tuba. You're increasing the variance because you're decreasing the sample size. You might have to decrease it a lot. And don't think that big data is going to solve this problem because it might be big, but you know it's big in this dimension as well as this dimension. A lot of features as well as a lot of cases. So it's not so easy. Also, if you are trying to do an observational study, and I don't think this is enough appreciated, and you decide you're going to personalize medicine by looking in the field, in the wild, in observational studies for people like these 5 people over here, okay? What you're going to find is probably all 5 of them got the same treatment. You can't compare anything to anything if they all got the same treatment. Or what if they didn't get the same treatment? Well, why didn't they get the same treatment? Was it random? Are the doctors random? Or do they know something that we don't know because it doesn't happen to be in our database? All right, well, you have to ask those questions before you try to really think that you know what you're doing with personalized medicine. That's my personal opinion. Okay, now what is your hope? Well, item 3 there says hopefully greatly increased effect sizes. If the effect sizes are way ginormous, then maybe that can compensate for the increased variance. We hope so. And maybe with the right questions, we will find those ginormous effect sizes. But then you also have the risks of multiple testing because the more you chop, the more subgroups you have, right? And all of those become new tests. And every time you ask a question, there's always a chance of getting the wrong answer. The more questions you ask, the more wrong answers you get. Okay, optimizing the lump split compromise. This is possible to do, but there are kind of 2 different angles to this. I was thinking of internal validity and external validity. So internal validity might be the answer is sufficiently correct to apply to new patients that are, quote, similar to those on studies. Now, you know, when we got started here with these guys, we don't really know if the D's and the L's are similar to each other or not. So we don't know, you know, that's why we don't know about internal validity here, because we can't say yet whether they're really similar or not. Or it will keep on working well in our environment, maybe in our city, for patients like the ones we've been treating, even if we don't know why. It doesn't really matter if we don't know why. If we keep doing it here with our kinds of folks, it should keep on working the same way. And a lot of useful medicine works for reasons we don't understand. It's okay. External validity is tougher. That means that the answer is sufficiently correct to apply even to new patients from a different sampling catchment, a different age, different location, different ethnicity, different socioeconomic group, so comorbidities, you name it, okay? For that, I think that's going to be more likely if the science that you learn from this is actually well-grounded scientifically. If there's reason for the features to have real substance as possible causes or related to possible causes, then you've got a better shot at external validity, which is what you really want if you really want to make strong contributions. Okay, what are some of the techniques? Well, there's meaningful Bayes priors. So if you're going to do a Bayesian analysis, that means you're feeding in prior information. We like to feed in no information from the prior because that is what? Objective. Right? We're looking for objectivity. But maybe there are cases where we can use prior information to guide our analyses more effectively. But you have to work really hard, especially in high dimensions, to get meaningful priors. Bayesian networks, hierarchical models, empirical Bayes, these are methods, I think ... You can use cross-validation to help select models or select tuning parameters and things like that. So that's another technique. There's a whole slew of bags of tricks you can use, but you always have to be cognizant from the very beginning of this bias versus variance trade-off, because you'll never get away from it. You just need to be aware of it and find that optimal point in the middle, right there, right, where the lines cross or where the sum is the lowest. That kind of thing that's what you're looking for. All right. Okay. So I think that covers everything I had to say on item 2, and we have 2 minutes left, I suppose, something like that, right? Okay. So I will therefore, just as I say, tell you that if you want to read about this so-called decline effect, there's even a Radiolab episode, if you like podcasts, about this. So it's a lot of fun to listen to. And they believe, they went to, if you can believe, Radiolab going into regression to the mean was their favorite explanation there. And here I go into, to the extent to which publication bias, where people like to publish significant p-values, but they don't like to publish non-significant p-values. To what extent do they explain things? And what don't they? And I will just scroll down far enough to see, oh, look at all that math, Greek letters and everything, that if R at the top is the odds of a true relationship, the entire bag of all hypotheses ever studied, R is the odds that one plucked out randomly is true. And R star is what happens after you analyze the data, all right? What's the chance, what is it that decreases that and makes it less likely to be true? I just wanted to point you to, this is John Ioannidis' list, the last item, hot scientific field. Hot scientific field will lower your R star and make it less likely that your finding is a real finding. Okay, so that's it for today, I think. So thank you very much for your time. Yes?
Why do some people prefer to use confidence interval over p-value?
Oh, great question.
The p-value is significant, the confidence interval includes the null. So
That's a very good question. In fact, actually, just a few weeks ago, there was an article published. Wow, what was the journal?
The National Science Foundation.
It was a bunch of statisticians getting together saying, you know how we've been saying all these years not to rely on p-values? Well, now we really mean it. But the arguments were all old arguments, but one of them is the p-value is, oh boy, don't get me started, but it's a combination of the effect size and the sample size. And just looking at the p-value, you don't know what combination of that is. So it might be an enormous effect with just barely enough sample size to pick it up. Or it might be an enormous sample with a totally unimportant thing. It's significant, but it's not medically significant, not biologically significant. But if you look at the confidence interval, you can actually answer both questions at once. You can see a sense of how much accuracy there is because of the size of it, And also, how far away is it from the null hypothesis? That's the other part of it. You can see it in one chunk. That's why people like them. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? One more? Yes.
I understand why you give us examples of healthcare research. Do you see these same types of issues with other types of research, looking at animal behavior or plant growth, or do you even know that answer?
Well, I don't even know the answer, but that won't keep me from answering it. There is a general distress at failure to replicate. This is different from reproducing data analysis. This is replicating by subsequent studies. A real sense of distress, especially in social sciences and psychology and so forth. And they regard it as a real crisis because they don't want to just churn out meaningless papers. Some of them actually want to know stuff and know it better than they knew it before, which I admire. So you have this thing in Nature. Over half of psychology studies failed reproducible. So an effort to reproduce 100 psychology findings found that only 39 of them held up. 15 were classified as not at all similar. Okay? How about in cancer? The truth wears off. Is there something wrong with the scientific method? Well, in cancer, drug development, raising standards for preclinical studies. Amgen tried to confirm 53 preclinical studies, only could confirm 6 of them out of 53. Wow, is right. Okay. This is another United study, repeatability of published microarray gene expression analyses of 18 quantitative papers published in Nature Genetics, which is even higher than Annals of Applied Statistics, found reproducibility was not achievable even in principle in 10 cases. Not even in principle. Right? And for the others, we were able to reproduce 2 analyses in principle and 6 partially or with some discrepancies, and 10 could not be reproduced at all. So in other words, I'm guessing, this is just 2 fields, but I'm guessing that it's shot through all of science.
One more question.
Thank you so
much,
Roger.